Hello and welcome back to the Gomer's YouTube channel. We use this channel to bring you insightful and informative short videos on some products, wine, spirits, and beer that we think you should know about to enjoy with your friends and family. Thank you for joining us on the last video that we did on sparkling wine and champagne. Again, I'm joined by Rich Zelich with Pinnacle Imports. And today we're going to talk about, again, a wine that is very timely with the seasons that are coming up with Thanksgiving and Christmas season. And the wine we're going to talk about today is Beaujolais.
Yeah, it's perfect. As you mentioned, I think Beaujolais is just wonderful with food, but we're also coming up on Beaujolais Nouveau Day, Pat. Do you know the date off the top of your head for this year?
In fact, I do, from looking it up earlier today. It is November 19th, Thursday, November 19th.
Excellent.
So it's always the third Thursday of November, every year.
Right. You want to talk a little bit about Beaujolais Nouveau before I talk into the Beaujolais that we're tasting today?
Sure. Beaujolais Nouveau is that very fresh, very brand new wine, really. They typically produce it, and then the Beaujolais Nouveau is generally consumed within about 3 or 4 weeks after bottling. It's meant to be shared as a celebration of the end of the harvest season, as well as kind of a kickoff to the traditional Thanksgiving feast and the last part of the year when we spend so much time with family and friends celebrating our previous year.
Yep. It's also kind of a way for the winemakers to get an idea about the quality of that year's harvest. And the reason they can do this is a style of winemaking that's called carbonic maceration. And I don't want to get too geeky in these videos. These are meant to be fun. But I think it's important to understand how Beaujolais Nouveau and Beaujolais are made. There's a process called carbonic maceration. And typically, if we were making wine, Pat, let's say you were a winemaker and you went out into your vineyard, Chateau de Pat, Chateau O'Reilly, it's very rolls right off the tongue.
It does.
You would pick the grapes and you would crush them and you'd leave the juice in contact with the skins. And then they would start the fermentation process. That's how almost all wine is made. But in the case of Beaujolais Nouveau and most Beaujolais, the process is a little different. So wineries bring in the grapes to the winery. They do not destem them. They keep the whole bunches together and they put them in a fermenter, which is sealed up. And then they add CO2. And you get a process that is sometimes called intracellular fermentation or anaerobic fermentation. And basically what happens is the grapes start going through fermentation while they're still whole grapes. And once they get to about 2% alcohol, then the grapes will burst and then you get the juice in contact with the outer skins. And then fermentation continues the traditional way. But because the juice spends less time in contact with the outer skins, you get less tannin. And that's really important. It's why Beaujolais Nouveau in particular drinks really easily. It's very silky, it's pretty light, and it does not have a lot of tannin. And tannins give red wines their structure, but it also kind of gets in the way of lighter foods. And if you're talking about having things like turkey, it's really easy to overpower those with big tannic wines. So I love Cabernet and Syrah, but I'm typically not having big examples of those with my turkey. So that's how Nouveau is made. Most Beaujolais is made in a process called semi-carbonic fermentation, where the CO2 is not added in, but the rest of it works the same. Whole bunches go into a sealed container, and they start that fermentation within the grapes.
Is that, when you say whole bunches, is that also whole cluster?
Yep.
Is that same thing?
Same thing. And a lot of times, if you're talking about that, what some people are talking about is stem inclusion, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the third wine that we have today. But let's kind of dig into the first one. Given that it's 2020, Pat and I have started drinking already.
Yes.
So we've got the first wine in our glass, and because we're going to drink a little bit, I am going to demask here. Now, Pat and I did take a lot of suggestions that we got from the people who watched the first video to heart. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
so we have
thank you guys very much. Keep those suggestions coming.
We have an impenetrable barrier here between us, which was a good suggestion. And as soon as I figure out how to put text up on YouTube videos, then I will do that as well. I'm old and a Luddite, apparently. So what we have in the glass right now is a Beaujolais Village, at this front center here, from a winery called Perrichon. And Laurent Perrichon is a very old domain. You can find records of Perrichon and Julianas going back to 1601. So they've been doing this for a little bit now. And in addition to Juliana's, they own land in 5 other crus. We'll talk about Cru Beaujolais in a bit. But this is just their Beaujolais Village. This is kind of their entry-level wine. And let's get our noses in here a little bit. We've already had our noses in here a little bit. This is what I love about good Beaujolais Village. Just bright red fruit, nice and aromatic, little floral, really easy to drink.
Very easy, like you mentioned earlier, though, very, very light tannin. So, like you said, nothing to get in the way with any food that you would want to. We've talked about Thanksgiving and Christmas food, but really any food that you would want to drink with this, even in the summertime. You know, early spring, you could drink this on the screened-in porch or on the patio and be just fine with this. It's very light.
Yeah, a lot of people put a little bit of a chill on Beaujolais, and yeah, it's a great little summer tipple.
Yeah, very good. Now, you mentioned Beaujolais Village, Beaujolais Cru. What's the difference in all that nomenclature? What does that mean?
That's a really good question. So let's talk about what Beaujolais is first. So Beaujolais is this region that sits in the very southernmost part of Burgundy. So most of Burgundy is this long hillside called the Côte d'Or, the Golden Slopes. And at the very bottom of that is Beaujolais. And there's a reason for that. So Beaujolais is made with a different grape than most red Burgundy. Red Burgundy is almost always Pinot Noir, 100% Pinot Noir.
Right.
So we can make everybody Burgundy experts. If it's white, it's Chardonnay. If it's red Burgundy, it's Pinot Noir. There you go. You're all sommeliers. Go forth and
really is
start your career.
And that's one thing, as you said, because once you figure out what the nomenclature of French wine, it really is pretty easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get into Italy, and that's a whole other story. But
and we will.
Yeah, but with French wine, it really is understand the terms, and it's really simple.
Yeah, it's very logical. There's a lot of rules here. The reason that you don't see Gamay grown in Pinot Noir goes back to a gentleman named Philippe the Bold in 1395. He did not like Beaujolais. He preferred Pinot Noir and thought Beaujolais did not make as good of wines. He actually referred to Beaujolais as a bad and disloyal grape, or to Gamay as a bad and disloyal grape, which I absolutely love. And so it was outlawed in Burgundy. But if you go south of Burgundy into the Beaujolais region, where the soils are, it's a lot of schist. I did not cuss. That was a schist, which is basically decomposing shale with some quartz, some feldspar, and granite. And the Gamay grape really thrives there. So that's, you can thank Philippe the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, for Beaujolais being where it is. So if the grape, if you're using Beaujolais and it's grown within anywhere in the Beaujolais region, you can call that Beaujolais. Again, going back to what Pat said, if you know the nomenclature, this starts to make a lot of sense. Now, within Beaujolais, there are 38 villages that are considered better quality. And so if your fruit comes from one of these 38 villages, then you are allowed to amend the term Beaujolais with Beaujolais Village, as we have here. And then above there are 10 crus. These are very special places where the wines are typically made in different ways and can be very, very long-lived. They can start to resemble Burgundy, actually, as they age and be really pretty special wines.
Now, with Beaujolais Village, I've seen where the label will have the name of the winery on there as well.
Yeah,
and also say, in smaller print, Village.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So there are 30 villages that are allowed. You can use just the name of the village if you want to do that. But yeah, it's important to really understand that if you're talking about French wine, there's this word that gets used a lot. It's a word called terroir. And there's no one-word English translation that really encapsulates everything, but essentially the idea is this is all of the different physical aspects of a particular vineyard and the effects that has on the finished wine. And of course, the winery will be listed on there as well, because winemakers, even if they're trying to be very non-interventionalist, will still have a hand in how the wine tastes. But it's important to understand that it does get a little more complicated. So yes, we've talked about Beaujolais Village, Cru Beaujolais, but then you have to know your producers, and knowing vintages is a good thing as well. And thankfully, we've had a number of vintages lately in Beaujolais that have been really, really good. There's a gentleman that a lot of you may know, a guy named Doug Frost, or know of at least. Doug lives in Kansas City, and he's like the nicest guy you'll ever meet, completely down to earth, and happens to be one of 4 people in the world who holds the titles of both Master Sommelier and Master of Wine. And again, you'd never know it. Completely laid back, super chill guy. And he was in the warehouse one day talking about wine, and we started talking about Beaujolais. And we're like little kids. It was like, Beaujolais, yeah, man, Beaujolais, Beaujolais. So it's just, this is a fun grape. When we did the champagne video, we kind of talked about how to properly open a bottle of champagne, and I want to do a little bit of that on just opening a bottle of wine. So the first thing I would recommend is get one of these. This is a double hinged corkscrew. There's two hinges. There's this one, and then there's this shorter hinge. I think everybody, if you move into a house, it automatically comes furnished with those double-armed silver corkscrew things.
The little wing ones.
The wing ones. Those are horrible.
Yeah.
Gomer sells these for a whopping $4.99. Buy a couple, you will lose them. I lose them all the time, and then I clean out my car, and oh look, I have 50.
Yes.
So the first thing is they all have this little knife. It's called a foil cutter, and traditionally these foils were made of lead, and now a lot of times they're just plastic. But they were designed to keep mice and things out of a cellar while a winery aged their wines for a very long time. And as I mentioned before, Beaujolais can age really, really well. I should show you this whole thing. So this corkscrew has, this part is called a worm. The little screw thing here is called a worm. And you will see this one is black. That is Teflon coated. And when we go to put these in, we're actually going to lay the cork and corkscrew sort of over to the side, find the center, and start pushing in. And once you've found the center, then you can straighten up the corkscrew. And what we're trying to do is avoid going through the side of the cork with the corkscrew, so we can avoid getting crumbles of our cork in our wine. So go down till there's just one or two turns left on the wing. Looks like I have a mustache. I'm very fancy. Then we're going to start with the first hinge. So the shorter one we put there. And what we're trying to do is keep the cork straight. If corks get bent over, it's a really good way to break them. And then you have more than just crumbles in your wine. So we'll start lifting up. You can see I'm actually holding the corkscrew over to the side. And once it comes out a little bit, I'm going to move to the longer arm. And again, finish pulling it up. Once it's almost all the way out, we'll just give it a little pull out like that, and we should be ready to go. So Pat, I have to hold your glass back here so I can get past our impenetrable barrier here.
Thank you. So, Rich, what would happen if you did get some cork into the bottle? What's the
instant death?
Yeah, instant death. I mean, it's not a major party foul, but you're like, oh my God, now what do I do with this great bottle of Beaujolais or whatever it is, and I've got cork in there? What's the best way to deal with that?
The easiest way probably is to use a strainer, and you can have little funnels and strainers and things like that. Or, if you're me and you're uncouth, I reach my finger in there and I pull the little piece of cork out. But that's me.
Yeah, that's I just pour it all into a decanter, and then I'm very careful, and at the end is a little bit of wine and a little bit of sediment and the cork, hopefully.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. All right, so what's in our glass here?
This is a little bit of a different animal.
This
is a wine that the store's worked with for a very long time. Perrichon's been in the store for a couple of years. We haven't worked with that one as long, but Bourgault's been in the store for many, many years. And a few years ago, I had a chance to go to Beaujolais. It was a fantastic trip, and I met the gentleman who is the owner of this winery and winemaker. It's a gentleman named Jean-Marc Bourgault. And Bourgault is a specialist of the Cru of Morgon. And wines from Morgon, this is one of the 10 crus I talked about. This tends to be one of the bigger ones. They make bigger wines. And the wines, they tend to be a little more broad-shouldered, a little more structured. Jean-Marc has made wine here since 1989. He started at a property that his aunt owns. And when we were there, we had a chance to taste his 1989s, and they are still fresh and beautiful, and you'd never believe that they had that much age on them, but they just age really, really well. So Jean-Marc actually has no heirs who want to make wine, so I'm considering moving there and becoming his heir. I think Richard Bourgault has a lovely ring to it.
Oui, I think so.
Or Patrick.
Yeah.
Patrick Bourgault.
Oh my gosh.
So we're moving above the Beaujolais Village level to Cru Beaujolais. Winemaking here is done essentially the same as it is done at Perrichon. This is the semi-carbonic maceration, so whole cluster fermentation, but no CO2 addition on either the Perrichon or on this.
Now, where does this? You mentioned that the Beaujolais region is at the bottom of Burgundy. So, which is at, I assume, at the south of Burgundy?
Correct. Yeah, the
So
southern end.
where would this come? Is this kind of toward the bottom of Beaujolais, where this wine or the cruise come from?
That's a great question. Well, actually, I'll edit it in a map on here. I will figure out how to do this and enter in a map. All the crus are actually sort of together within Beaujolais, and there tends to be an even greater of granitic soil composition where these things are. But yeah, they're all kind of together. It's pretty interesting. You can taste a difference on this. So there's more dark fruit here. There's still some red fruit, but this is more darkly fruited. The wine's bigger, but again, it's really polished.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of tannin to dry out the palate, and that's why this will work with Thanksgiving food. This with dark meat turkey is awesome. Sage stuffing and dark meat turkey and some gravy, and my mouth is watering now. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, this seems closer to that Burgundian style, Pinot Noir style than the first one we had.
Yeah, and we'll move more in that style as we go. Yeah, there's this characteristic of Bordeaux wines, and that is intensity without power, or depth without power. And this wine dances on the palate, and I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it really does. There's weight here, but it's so lifted, it's so bright. There's such great acidity here that it dances on the palate.
This is really good. Yeah, this to quote a mother-in-law of mine, it tastes like more. Thanks, Barb.
Well, I will tell you, that's one of the great things about Beaujolais is the prices tend to be really reasonable. So the Parisson we started with is $12.99.
Yeah.
This Bordeaux, this Cru Beaujolais, and one of the best examples you can get, is still only $22.99. If we were talking top examples of Bordeaux or Burgundy or even Champagne, then we're into the hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars a bottle. There is not, I don't think I've ever seen a bottle of Beaujolais that was more than $120, and that is very rarefied stuff. Most Beaujolais tends to be more in kind of the price range that we're talking about with the first two wines, $12.99 to $25.99 maybe for really good Cru Beaujolais.
Now, on the first one, as you're opening up the third wine, but this one says Côte de Puy. What does that mean?
That's a good question. So this is not just the Bordeaux is not just Morgon. It's actually from a real specific hill site called the Côte de Puy, and Côte just means hill or hillside when we're talking about wine. So this hill, the Côte de Puy, is this real granitic and schist again. No swear jar needed. Just hillside, and I remember standing on the very top with Jean-Marc, and the vines are very small. These are bush pruned vines. They're not on big trellises anywhere, and it was kind of windy there, and you could see most of Beaujolais from this spot. It was really fascinating. But yeah, it's this really special hillside. Now, within that hillside, he actually even does two single parcel bottlings, one called James and one called Jarviniers. And if you ever want to have a brilliant display of what terroir really is, you try those two wines back to back, because you wouldn't believe they came from the same producer, same vintage, same area, nothing. They're just chalk and cheese different wines, but they're both really beautiful, and they're from sites that are a quarter of a mile away from each other, maybe. Pat, I'll be very interested to see what you think of this one. This is something a little bit different.
All right. Well, the nose is very much unlike the first two.
Oh yeah.
This has got much more going on.
Yeah, this smells like Burgundy. And there's a very good reason for that. This is a great producer called Lafarge Vial, and there's some pretty serious pedigree to this. So Frederic Lafarge ran his father's domain with him for many, many years. His father has passed away. It's a domain in Volnay called Domaine Michel Lafarge, and they were some of the great Volnays. Fred decided that he wanted a new challenge, as if making top flight wine in Beaujolais and Volnay isn't tough enough. So he and his wife Chantal, whose maiden name was Vial, that's where the Lafarge Vial comes from, decided that they would purchase about 4 hectares of Beaujolais, of Cru Beaujolais, and start a brand new project. This is just completely different. This is made much more in the style that Burgundy would be made in. These are producers from Burgundy, so you don't see as much of that whole cluster fermentation here. This is only about 25% whole cluster, and this is actually the newest edition. They have less than a hectare, or maybe just over, actually, I think a hectare of the Côte de Brie. And this is my first time getting to try the new vintage. This is pretty special.
And this just really just sings on the nose.
I haven't even tasted it yet. It's so captivating on the nose. There's this little hint of black licorice on this. It is. There's that little forest flory kind of thing, little funky in a very, very good way.
Oh man. Now you mentioned hectare. For us in the United States, we're used to talking about acres of land, 10 acres, 20 acres. What is a hectare equivalent to?
I didn't want to talk yet. I just want to leave that in my
mouth. Sorry. Sorry to
interrupt. That's good. No, I've got a bottle here. I'll have more. So a hectare is about 2.5 acres.
Okay.
And it can be difficult in France to have a lot of vineyard area. It actually goes back to Napoleonic law. Pat, you are, how many siblings do you have? You're from a family of 7? Of 9?
I'm the oldest of 9.
Of 9.
Yep.
So before Napoleon, the Napoleonic law, if your father and mother could have said, we only like Pat, we're giving all the vineyard land to Pat. Napoleonic law dictated that wines had to be split equally between all family members, all offspring. So if you had a 9-hectare property, then you and your 8 siblings each would have gotten 1 hectare. Now, Pat, you don't have a ton of kids, but let's say you'd had 9 kids, again, with your lovely and apparently very patient wife.
Right. Very patient.
Then they would each end up with a 1/9 of a hectare.
Oh, wow.
And so on and so on and so on. So it can be very difficult to own much vineyard land and to be able to purchase it. And sometimes the government gets involved and says, no, you cannot purchase this. So there are a lot of really interesting laws and tax laws about who can buy property and how much they're going to pay for it.
Interesting.
So this is another Cru Beaujolais. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is really good.
This is a little more expensive. Now, this is about as great of a Beaujolais as you can get. This is, again, one of the greatest producers in Volnay, using a lot of that same technique in a Cru Beaujolais. So you're at $45.99 here, which for Beaujolais is kind of the top of the price range. But if you were pricing it compared to his Volnays, this is the steal of the century.
Nice. Now, because this has got a lot more structure and a lot more going on, obviously Nouveau Beaujolais you're not going to age. Beaujolais Village you're going to drink within a couple 3 years. Something like this, I mean, definitely very age-worthy. How long would you lay this in your cellar for?
If I had the patience, which I assure you I do not.
I would not, no.
20, 25 years.
Wow,
and
okay.
it would just be glorious. There is more structure here, but for me, a lot of the structure comes not from tannin. This is still not a very high tannin wine.
No,
There's a little hint of it, but the acidity on this is so bright. My mouth is watering. It's this interesting interplay between my palate being refreshed constantly because of that acidity making me salivate, but the length of this wine is so long. It just kind of keeps coming back for more. The wine that keeps on giving. But yeah, you could age this for a quarter of a century, and this would resemble Burgundy. Many years ago, I was able to go to a wonderful steakhouse, Burn's Steakhouse in Tampa, Florida. And it's one of the largest privately owned collections of wine in the world. It's really amazing. And we had the best experience with a sommelier we could ever have. So a lot of people, if you say sommelier, you still get this mental image of this snooty French guy with a little tastagan and a tuxedo. We had a guy who was completely chill and knew his wines. This is, again, a huge wine list, but really knew his stuff. And he came over and we introduced ourselves and said, look, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like you to select wines and bring them out blind to us. Don't tell us what they are. And here's about how much we want to spend total. And here's about how many wines we would like. And here's some wines that we enjoy, just to give you some kind of guidelines. And he brought us a wine that we sat there debating for half an hour about what region of Burgundy it was from. And when it was revealed, it was Beaujolais from 1979.
Wow.
Absolutely
1979.
stunning. 1979. Now, this was a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but still, really a lovely wine.
Wow.
But I would never have said Beaujolais based on drinking young Beaujolais. And I sadly don't get to drink Beaujolais from 1979 all that often. 41-year-old Beaujolais now. It's crazy.
My gosh. I'll bet that was an experience.
Indeed it was. Oh, that's stunning. This is new to the store. There is not much of this to go around, sadly. Again, I think just over a hectare of land owned in the Côte de Brouilly, and really sought after wines. But there will be a couple bottles of this in the store.
Very cool. Very cool. I will have to pick up a bottle for myself. Get that into the house somehow. But anyway, Rich, anything else we need to cover with Beaujolais?
I don't think so. So, yeah, we had some different wines today. A Beaujolais Village, and then 2 crus. We had the Morgon and the Côte de Brouilly. And a lot of people know Brouilly is a cru, Côte de Brouilly is a separate cru, but the Hill of Brouilly, again, a lot of hillside stuff. No, these are, again, really wonderful wines, great for the upcoming holidays. If you're going to pick up Beaujolais Nouveau because it's fun, absolutely do it, but get some real Beaujolais while you were at it.
Very cool. All right, Rich, thank you very much for being here today. As always, thank you guys for joining us and enjoying. Keep those comments coming. And Rich, cheers.
I need wine in my glass.
You need some wine in your glass.
Hey.
First. There we go.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.